Good morning, everybody. My name is Doug with 2 Plus Stuff, and thank you so much for joining me on While You're Reforging. Now, if you're new to the channel or this kind of show, basically I do a whole bunch of lore videos and voice stuff throughout the week, but at least once a week I like to just hang out and chat with people a little more casually. And so on this show, we do it weekly, normally on Fridays, but this week I'll get to it. I got bumped today. And we're just going to talk about all things hobby, mostly Age of Sigmar, because that's kind of my jam, but kind of everything. And so we're going to go over news, hobby progress that I'm doing here, as well as a main topic, which today is talking about why rules matter, even if you're just a narrative gamer, because there tends to be sort of a stigma that, like, you know, only competitive people complain about good rule sets and balance and points and things like that. And it simply isn't true. Narrative gamers win from those conversations as well. So I want to talk about that. But basically how this is going to work, let me pop out the chat so I can put it somewhere it's a little bit easier to see. And the way that I do this show essentially is by just... I didn't get any of my news things ready. We're going to cover one part of the show, and then we're going to basically have a break time where you guys can give your input. I'll respond. You can ask questions. I'll answer them about my opinions on stuff, and we'll just kind of go from there. And so, like all the shows, we're going to kick it off talking about some hobbies. So let me throw on this light down here. I actually have a lot to talk about, which is great because honestly, man, it was a slow couple weeks if you guys were paying attention to the hobby progress I was able to bring. So let's see, we got a few things here. Let me move again my chat so I can see it at this angle. Here we go. So I bought a few used things from a local store that actually sells used models. We actually have a couple. Yeah, like Blue Sky Hobbies, Mingo Games. I know there's 2 or 3 others in our area. So we have a Demon Prince that I got for like 15 bucks, and then a Soul Grinder, this guy right here, that was only 25, I think, something like that. Now, they have issues. This guy, actually, he's actually perfect. He was just primed blue, but it's such a thin primer. I'm just gonna basically Nurglefy some bits and then reprime them. Like, this is really, it's hard to articulate, but like, he used an extremely thin paint, so that's perfect. Over here with Boss Hog, this is a Soul Grinder Clancy. Yeah. This one, I don't know what he was doing. I will be perfectly honest with you. Essentially, I looked at the picture of the actual Soul Grinder online, and it looks like he put, let me see if I can get the camera to line up right, this little spot right here, that metal piece that goes lengthways, or side to side. I don't understand how that fits into this. It kind of looks like he just put it in there to boost the body up, because it don't look right. Like, I could probably be sure I could snap that part of him off, bring him down, because he's actually supposed to be much lower. Like, this buckle's supposed to be like right there. But honestly, I was looking at this, I'm like, actually, I don't want to do that. What I want to do is get some sculpting putty, or like, not green stuff, because that would use way too much green stuff for what I'm thinking, but like, no, I can't think of the name. They sell it at Hobby Lobby. But anyway, just some like clay that dries, turns hard, and basically putting a big fat Nurgle belly right there, and it's a belly that'll kind of like have fat rolls that wrap around all that, so it'll just make the body look a little more seamless. So that's what I have in my mind right now. So yeah, that's kind of the next project for him. It's not a priority, to be honest with you. I kind of got him because Milliput, thank you, Cold Shoulder. Yeah. Doug, do you strip paint? I won't for these guys specifically, because 1, I don't like to strip paint, and 2, I'm looking at the detail, honestly, and like, it's still sharp. I mean, that's honestly, when it comes to like, what I strip paint versus just go on another layer or whatever like that, it's like, you know, I don't really care enough. I'm gonna level with you, unless it is like I'm losing detail. That's to me when it matters. But I prime so lightly and I paint so lightly in terms of like thin coats and that kind of thing, that I won't gain anything by stripping the paint. And you know, for 25 bucks, I don't care. Honestly, I mainly got him because it was a steal, and I was like, well, you know, I can use him in 40k as well. So, I got a lot of stuff primed and built. This was the week of building. So, let me show you. I call this collection everything that Tom Lyons didn't want. I'm going to see how this looks if I just put the bin. There we go. Okay. So rather than pulling everything out and turning this into a 4-hour show, what basically we're having here is we have 9 plague drones. Okay, so that's the Nurgle demons on flies. We have the worm spat, which is the Nurgle Warhammer Underworld's warband. We have Horticulus Slimix. We got 2 Beasts of Nurgle. We got a Spoilpox Scrivener, who is unremarkable in AOS. I think is probably the nicest thing that I've heard competitive people describe him as. But in 40k, he's actually quite good. So I was like, you know what? It fits. Lord of Plagues, unit of Blight Kings, and 2 Nurgle trees. So, yeah, it's... Jacob says it's quite a haul. It is quite a haul, but it's some of those things that, like, I've just kind of been collecting kits here and there, and then I just wasn't in the mood to paint this week. I don't know why, but I was like, you know what? We're just gonna build them. Everything's getting built, and off camera to the side, I still have Gut Rot Spoom and a Harbinger of Decay and more Blight Kings, and yeah. So I think it's fair to say I am patently in on Nurgle. So, yeah, there were 2 Beasts of Chaos in there. So let's head back here. And we'll turn that light off because it's blinding as all get out. And let's see. Can you ever have enough Nurgle cavalry? Absolutely not. And so that's it for my hobby progress. And so, like I said, between topics and scenes of the show, that kind of thing, I'm going to open it up. So friends, what are you working on this fine and glorious morning? And yeah, any questions about my Nurgle stuff that I showed off? Anything like that? Rouse321, Doug, isn't Nurgle the army you held on to for the longest? It is. It's up there. Nurgle stuff is an aesthetic that I keep coming back to. This army is one that there was one moment where I wanted to start over. Like, I was like, now I feel my Maggotkin, that kind of thing. But honestly, now I love him. You can see him up there right above me. That is the Glotkin. Now, that is the longest I've owned a single model. I just love him. He's super cool. He doesn't actually even match the scheme that I'm doing, because he was actually the first like big model, like bigger than, say, like a Korgorath, or like that kind of like medium-sized thing, Dreadnought for 40k, that kind of thing. One of those things that I built, and so yeah, I've held on to him for quite a long time. That's been 4 years, and it's just, you know, I've done a few Death Guard models in 40k. I've done a few Chaos Warriors with Nurgle before Maggotkin, the book, came out for AOS, and yeah, it's just something I keep coming back to. And so my goal with the army was to create something that I put so much work into that I don't want to flip it. And if I want to flip, you know, other armies, like, you know, buy low, paint them, and sell higher, I can, but I don't want to do that with my Nurgle. So yeah, it's definitely become my army. Zozie, change your logo, add some slimy goodness. Ooh, that's a good idea. I should make a painting hangout, like a super gross Nurgle one. Like for if I'm just doing a normal hangout with folks, I should definitely do that. I got a giant in preparation for the Sons of Behemoth. Nice. Zombie Man playing the Necromunda video game. Good call. I enjoy it. There's a lot of negative reviews. I think it's pretty cool. I'm gonna be honest with you. Well, we can chat about it when we get to the news here. But Chaos Xander's winning at life. He's eating a Hot Pocket. Let's see. 2 Nurgle trees. I'm happy they announced you can only use 1 before I bought 3. 2 Nurgle trees. I'm happy they announced you can only use 1. You can only use one. I mean, you only get one for free, but you can summon as many as you can. So I'm kind of curious what you mean. Let me think about that. Zartulus? Tell me why you're saying one. Anyway, we'll move on. Got Necrons built. Awesome, Eric. Okay, sweet. Then it's the right armor for you. I'm in love with the Iron Jaws. This weekend I'll be finishing last 3 of 12 Gore Grunters. Nice. Gore Grunters are so cool. They really are, because anything with a lot of fur and bulk and organic shapes like the Gore Grunt, like the actual mounts have, gets really fun to paint. To me, anyway. Weird question. Are you going to play Necromunda or Mordheim again? I am. Yes, I am. I'm in the home stretch of my time at my day job. And so once that's free, I'm going to come up with a content schedule, and basically a couple nights a week I'm going to have a regular time to play those games and just hang out with people. And it could be painting, could be gaming, but I certainly want to do Mordheim and the Necromunda game because I really do enjoy them. And I gotta say, the voice acting in Necromunda, love it. So good. Yeah. Oh, we got Spezia in here. Here we go. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. Let's see. Nurgle Halloween 2 plus tough logo. That's awesome. Joseph's rocking, what is it? 10 Skitari Rangers, 1 Tech Priest. Okay, cool. Clan says, I get some of the negative reviews for Necromunda, like the enemies walking into walls for a straight minute, but I love the game itself. Yeah, and and honestly, I'm at the point now where when it comes to video games specifically, and I feel this way about Total War, pick your favorite Games Workshop intellectual property, but also any AAA game, just we've reached a point where games come out with bugs. They're so complex, and it's just like, walking through walls and AI, that could be patched, and I know a lot of folks don't see it that way, but they're like, oh, I gave you money and I want a finished product, but it's like, man, with the way that the internet works and connectivity and live service games, that's just not the way of the world. Or at least it's not the way that business people, when they're doing their financial fortune telling, feel. So how about that? That's probably the key, is that it's not so much that I've resigned to this fate, it's just that this is the way that business people do things, and we're all at the mercy of it. We're going to move along before this slips into Doug ranting with a tinfoil hat about the corporatocracy taking over the world. So, we're going to hop on over to the news. Let me throw the news up here. And let's see. You can probably get this thing out of the way. It is, after all, the whole reason I have 2 screens. So let me pull up the chat so I don't lose it. All right, so like I said, I forgot to pull this up beforehand, but that's all right. Honestly, it's a lot of Necromunda stuff, just a whole lot, which is great because the game came out. They had their big review or preview for what they called the Codex show. If you're not familiar with that, basically, how do I describe this? So basically, yeah, they're redoing all of the codexes for 40K. No, all the ones that currently exist function with the current system, but they aren't perfectly tuned for it. They could do better, and now they have this whole Crusade system, which is like a better path to glory, and they're going to start implementing that in the books, as well as giving you digital copies through the app and stuff like that. And so, yeah, and so they kind of announced, I believe it's in October is when the Space Marines and the Necrons books will drop, and they had some previews for that. Honestly, I'll talk about it here in a second when I do my games played, but yeah, I still don't have a good enough grasp on 40K to know, I can't just read a war scroll or whatever they call them, codex entry, and be like, oh yes, this is what this unit does, and speak intelligently. Yeah, no, I don't know. I gotta think about that. Anyway, so you can order a action figure Space Marine if you were just like, I need more toys in my life. And that's pretty much it. I don't usually go through the regimental standards because they're more fun to read than they are to have read to you. And yeah, that's about it. They have some comic books coming out that seem really cool. Cold Shoulder says the Codex preview was alright. I have a feeling Space Marines will be too strong to play against with my more fun Eldar. You know, here's the thing. When you've been in the Games Workshop hobby for enough time, you learn the cycle of life, which is that the Space Marines come out with a new book, and everyone's like, "Holy crap, Space Marines!" And then that stock in Space Marines drops because every other book that comes out in that edition gets better. And so you never want to be the first book when GW drops. Like if they could do Chaos Demons like 3 books from now, or like 5 books after what they've previewed, because they previewed a few more after that. So that's what I want. So that's going to be my thing of just like, I want to be it when you hit your stride, right? Like you start here and it's too powerful, but then the power creep goes up, and then they kind of try to course correct. It's like, I want to be right in there where I can autopilot. Not really, but you know what I mean. And I'll be honest with you, that is pretty much it for the news. There was not a lot happening this week, which is okay because a lot of folks' wallets are still weary, and a lot of folks are prepping to save for some of the cool things they announced the other week. So, you know, like the Warcry new starter set and all that kind of stuff. As for me, I actually I want to pause here because now we just finished the news section, and we're going to move into my games played. I actually played 2 games this since the last time I recorded. Had a great time with both of them, so I want to chat about them. One's 40k and one's AOS. But if you have any thoughts about the news this week or thoughts on Battle Tomes, go ahead and throw it in the chat. I'll keep my eye on it here for a hot second. Let's see here. I'm actually more looking forward to breaking all these Space Marine toys with my Chaos Space Marines. That'll own them all myself. Also, hello everyone. Hey, what's up? Those heavy incinerators being troops choices is yikes. Yeah. If you didn't know, where is it at? They got some schmancy new models. Actually, the one model I want to show off that I actually really did like also, this is incredible art. I love it. It's the only thing that's ever made me like Necrons. Let me scroll down to them. These guys. So if you guys don't know, there exists a unit called the Flayed Ones in the Necrons, and basically, so they're like Terminators, right? They're like robots, and there's a lot more to their lore. I'm way oversimplifying. But there is a virus that affects, it's wholly unique to Necrons, and it makes them want to be back in their mortal bodies, and so like they'll like tear skin off and wear it. This guy has a face on his shoulder. That's nasty, and I love it. I'm here for all of this. So they just have like gore and body parts all mangled around them. They're trying to like put themselves back in their skin. It's like, oh, that is pure darkness, and I like it. This guy is a cowl. I love it. Anyway, that's pretty much the only models that was like, oh shoot, that's amazing. I want to get into 40k, but I want them to release supplements for Emperor's Children and World Eaters, so I can use the demons I have for AOS. Well, actually, for me, to that point, like I went and grabbed the Chaos Demons Codex, and then that's honestly the reason why that box was so jam-packed with, you know, Beasts of Nurgle, I have a Soul Grinder, Demon Prince, all those things is because they do work in both games. And I could just run a demon army, you know, and again, if all you're looking to do is use your demons is what I'm saying, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and grab the Demons Codex. It's strange because maybe I don't understand how it works now, but I know that there are like plague bearers or something in the Nurgle book, but taking them seems weird. Like, not, it doesn't seem weird, but like there was a weird rules thing that I can't remember what it was. But basically, you were incentivized to take 2 different detachments, at which point you might as well just bring your demons and have a demon army. So yeah, really excited for all of the rumor engines going on at the moment. GW are making beautiful dynamic models. Yeah, for sure. 40k armies don't work like that in Chaos. Oh yeah, you were answering that. Yep. Yeah, you don't need an Emperor's Children book or World Eater ones to start playing your demons. You just grab the Demon Codex. It's awesome. You know, your mortal stuff won't work. Like, Rotbringers and junk. You know, they're all in different size bases and that kind of thing. But, you know, Death Guard's super cheap. Oh, they don't have... Death Guard and Thousand Suns don't have the Nurgle and Tzeentch demons either. I did not know that. Thank you. We're all learning together then. Alright, so I'm going to move into my games played. Now, I played 2 games, like I said. The first one was against my buddy Ben, who introduced me to the new 40k. Hashtag new 40k, as they say on the interwebs. And so if you guys remember, I had a whole bunch of Sisters of Battle. And I was kind of on the fence about what I actually wanted to do with them. My camera does not want to focus right now. Hold on. I was kind of on the fence about what I wanted to do with them. I was not enthused to paint them at all. And so I was kind of like, do I keep them? Do I sell them? I have them. It's a good little lot to get started with an army. And Ben had suggested, well, why don't you bring them over, play a game with them, and then, you know, like, we'll just try 9th edition and see how you feel after that. And I was like, that's cool. And so went over there with my sisters. It was like a 700-ish point game, something like that, just with what was assembled, and kind of walk through the changes that were made from one edition to the next. And I gotta say, really do enjoy it. Like, I would say 40k made some major steps to being more like AOS in terms of way simplified army construction. It is different for sure. I'm not saying it's just a hero and 2 battle line, or 3 battle line, whatever it is. Like, you know what I mean? It's a little bit different, but it's not nearly the taxing, annoying soup detachment ness that it was before. So I really, really enjoyed that. Also, some of the rules, I mean, the minor things as far as things that I liked about 40k quite a bit for a while now is like all charging units go first and then you alternate. There were some minor things that like we played. What mission did we play? We played one where there was, like, if I'm not mistaken, 4 objectives, and you basically wanted to control as many as you could, but like you get a bonus within that specific battle plan for controlling like 1 and 3 or 2 and 4. You know, like very specific combinations. Let me change that music. That's way too intense for Doug's channel. You put on a calm playlist and it's like, I don't know. I don't have nearly enough LSD to enjoy that song. So anyway, yeah, really enjoyed the way the missions were scored. It was fantastic. I think the final total was 27-21. The sisters took it, although I will say it was down to the wire because Ben took his salamanders, which is the Space Marines, and yeah, he kind of front loaded with a bunch of big guns that were good at clearing light troops, which is thankfully all that Sisters of Battle really have. And then the way that the game functions now is so interesting, where you walk up to the table and your mission that you're playing has, like, here's your core objective. Like, we would call it a battle plan in AOS. Very simple. In addition to that, however, you get to pick 3 secondary objectives, and they have a whole bunch in the book. And what I think is incredible is the wide range of things that they have. And this is actually something that immediately as we're playing it, I'm like, I need this in AOS. Because, and here's why I say this, you don't have to be hardcore on the main battle plan, you know, mission that you're in. Okay, so like let's give an example here. Stormcast players really hate the one where you can't put anything up in reserves. Someone in the chat, go ahead and throw that name of that mission out there. I can't think of it. But what if Stormcast players then picked 3 secondaries that were either A, flavorful, or they could do very, very effectively? And so it's a matter of just, you pick 3 objectives that either match the theme of your army or that you think you can achieve regardless of the main actual objective of the mission. And all those things, they score together. You can get a max of 15 points for each of them per turn, and you just rank them up that way. So it's really, really cool. Total commitment. Thank you, Spezia. Man, you're fast on the draw. So that's awesome. I'm like super into it. Let's see. I just opened up something by accident. Sorry, everybody. So it was an interesting thing. It was very different. Game took a while because your first games always do. We were kind of walking through things. And I definitely thought I was like on the back burner, like on the back ropes. I was going to lose hard. But no, actually, I pulled it out in the end because Ben's Dreadnought did nothing. He had a Dreadnought. That was like one of the 3 things that I had to kill as one of my secondaries because I picked one where it's like just target the most expensive units that your opponent has. And he was like, oh, I don't know if they can take him. And then my was it the matriarch or whatever the leader is, the canoness, that's her name, just went and just wrecked him, and it was awesome. Do you have a homebrew Space Marine chapter? I don't play Space Marines now. But so that was his, and then afterwards, we were discussing the game, kind of walking through it, and he asked if I was interested in keeping the sisters. I said, I liked them, but there's just a lot going on, and I wasn't crazy about some of the stuff that now that I'm playing the game, like as far as the miracle dice, I'm like, I don't really care for that. So, yeah, I went ahead and I sold those off and took those proceeds and just got a bunch of home demons and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, Avery says the new system is very forgiving. It is. It really is. And I think the reason why I liked it is because I'm looking in real time and I'm seeing like, okay, Ben got up on objectives or victory points really, really early, but then I came back in the second half. I'm like, there are so many runaway games in AOS because all we measure things by is major or minor victory. And our secondaries for this game are just tiebreakers, but I mean, I've just heard so many folks say that they're irrelevant, and that's a shame because with the kind of game that I had where it's like I was picking secondaries that 1, I thought my army could do, and 2, there's a bunch there that like, oh, this is what a Sisters of Battle army would do. Like, this is how they fight, and so you can have even better narrative games. I'm like, oh man, like the narrative potential in this is amazing. Let's see. And then the second game was yesterday. So the reason this show got delayed today was because yesterday they decided, of course, on September 11th, which is just smart, to go ahead and try testing all of the fire alarms in my apartment complex. If you guys don't know, I don't know how well you can see, it is a solid green/yellow outside my apartment. Because we have fires going in the mountains and the smoke's coming over, and so it's basically sunset here at 10:30 in the morning. And they decided yesterday was a great time to try the fire alarms on September 11th. So woke up to a bunch of alarms going off, and then Jack texted me and was like, hey, you want to come over? I was like, well, I sure as heck can't do a live show during this. So I went down, got a game in. It was his, it was a Stormcast army. It had Gotrek in it and a bunch of, I think it was the Gav bomb is what people talk about. Gabriel Sherhart launching some dudes forward. Very, very cool stuff. I brought my Maggotkin, but I did something different. So I told Jack, like, let me back up a little bit. So I was painting a whole bunch of Beasts of Chaos for the Nurgle army. I said, this is specifically just for my competitive gaming stuff. And I was kind of struggling at a certain point to keep painting the Ungor. And so Jack had suggested, well, why don't you just come down, bring them unpainted, we'll play a quick game, and you can see if you like them, because if you don't, you won't waste any time. I was like, oh, that's actually a really good idea. So took that opportunity yesterday, and I did what I always do, which is I have Puskull Blightlords, and I launched them forward into the front line. I kind of derped up in round 1 by placing my big unit just outside of the Feculent Gnarlmaw's run and charge range. So that was real weird. Will asks, why are the skies weird? Oh, because the ash and smoke in the skies is darkening everything, making everything have a weird tint to it. So that's what I did, except I replaced that whole second half of the army, where normally I would do like Blight Kings or some kind of demons or whatever, and took the Beasts of Chaos, the Pestilent Throng. And it wasn't the exact tournament list that I had in mind, like I was going to flood the board with Ungors and that kind of thing. But it was still really fantastic. I mean, in terms of as a test, right? Like, it was a fantastic test to see if I wanted to invest more. And it turns out, no, I don't. I don't like them. I started doing the math in my head as I was driving down to meet him. I was like, all right, so I got this unit of 20 Ungor. They're going to run super fast and hop on an objective. And then I was like doing the math. I'm like, wait, but a basic unit of 5 Blight Kings is 21 wounds, which is 1 more than the Ungor unit has, and has a 4-up save instead of a 5 or 6-up, depending on if you have a shield or not. I was like, actually, as I'm driving there, I'm like, I think Blight Kings are just better at doing the same thing. And so, I mean, Ungor have a role for sure in the Pestilent Throng, and there's a lot of things you can do with them. But all those things, their main strength, I think, is the speed, right? Because that's just a Beast of Chaos thing. But I already have the speed on lock. Like, the things that I would use them for speedy-wise, the Affliction Cyst is already doing. So I need something that can, like, have staying power. And I found that I'm more into the Nurgle stuff in terms, like Nurgle, like Maggotkin specific things that you would find online. So it was a really good game. Jack destroyed me. It was I think 3 places. No, it was not 3 places of power. Focal points, and had a wonderful time. We just got to hang out. Chat for a bit. I haven't actually been able to like get out and see my friends in some time, so it was actually very, very nice to get out of the house and just chat with people and roll some dice. So it was a great time. I lost epically. I think if memory serves, I remember asking, okay, so we're in round 3, and I can't remember if we rolled for priority and he got round 3 and so we just shook hands, or if we rolled out in turn 4, but we made it about halfway, if not less, through a game, and it was just like, oh wow, these Beasts of Chaos just crumple into dust. And so, you know, basically everything went off without a hitch. There's minor problems with the flies getting up there and just clogging up the alleyways, but the Beasts of Chaos just didn't have the metal to do anything. And so right now I'm going to kind of fall back into my Affliction Cyst and Blight Cyst kind of thing. The problem is, and here's a question for the chat, because I'm going to end this section and leave it open for, you know, replies and comments and stuff. Again, this is specifically for tournament lists where I want to go 2-1 at a day event, which is kind of my goal. I don't want to win the thing. It's not what I'm there for. But I want to do better than I don't. So my question is, how hard should I work to try and get wizards in my list? Because if I take the Blight Cyst the way that I was before, where it was very effective for me, Blight Kings are awesome, I don't have room for any wizards, which means I don't get a chance to even take a shot at the Foul Regenesis spell, or the spell that lets you like turn the cycle of corruption, and I don't have any chances to unbind things. So my question is, how hard do I work at getting a wizard in, knowing that Nurgle's not good at magic, right? Like, basically what I'm asking is, if I go, into a tournament and I don't have a strong magic presence, is it just worth it at all, or just kind of be like, I'm just gonna give up that phase? I'm kind of curious as to everyone's thoughts, because I was watching Warhammer Weekly and Tom Lyons made it seem like if you don't have any, like, if you can't compete in the hero phase when it comes to magic, then there's almost no point, and I just don't know. Cody says I gotta have at least one, a token wizard. Of course, this is a fantasy game. So I'll go ahead and give you guys time to answer that. I'm just going to respond to a few things here. Where am I at? I'm just outside Seattle. Yeah, the whole West Coast is in flames. Let's see. Do someone know when GW will release the Beastmen from Underworlds? No, I don't. Sorry, they have not really announced anything Inspire Tyrants too, yeah. I imagine, honestly, they're going to be a super random drop that no one saw coming. They're just going to have a week where they don't have anything new to push, and they'll be like, oh yeah, here's some Beastmen. That's pretty much it. But I have to imagine, so because they previewed the next season of Underworlds, because, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that when they started the next season, that's when they released the model packs for the previous season as standalones. I think that's how it worked last time. So you should be able to get them soon because the next season's just kicking off. So yeah. Let's see. We got depends on if Tourney has a lot of Tzeentch players or Seraphon. That's a fair point. I'd be inclined to leave it. Most of the time having the one wizard probably won't make a huge impact. Yeah. I don't know. A lot of conflicting opinions, and I love all of them. I love it. So we're going to move into the next thing. Oh, greetings from Sweden. From an African. Hello. Hi there. That's awesome. How'd you end up in Sweden? That is a hop, skip, and a jump. Anyway, so we're gonna move into my main topic for the day. Let me just pull up my little notes here. I have a little prompt to kind of keep me focused. But essentially asking about why are rules so important for narrative gamers, right? A lot of times we hear this stigma or the way we talk to each other in the community is that it's only, super janky, broken, competitive players that are the ones crying about rules not working and points being wrong and all that kind of stuff. And likewise, on the flip side of that coin, I should say, and that kind of mental line of thinking leads more narrative and very casual players to have sort of a stigma against the competitive scene, and I think that's crummy. On the flip side, the competitive folks I have seen multiple times kind of under the idea that narrative players just like bad games, right? You know what I mean? Where it's like, you don't care at all that this is not functioning. All you care about is, your story and that kind of thing. And that's honestly not true either. It is equally inaccurate. And so today what I wanted to chat about is why good rules and points and that kind of thing matter to narrative players. Now, there are a lot of ways to play this game. The 3 ways to play of matched play, narrative, and open war, I've said before, they are not 3 distinct doors, but they are in fact a Venn diagram, and you can take parts from one and then the other. For example, my friends and I, we love to play narrative missions, but we use points. We build narrative armies. We have names for our generals and stuff, but we use matched play points. And so there's a way to do kind of everything. And so I'm often confused as someone who likes game imbalance, but it's not. I just like asymmetrical. And what I mean by that is there is a sense of balance in terms of how we're trying to conduct this game. We have clear missions, we have good rules, maybe we're playing at the same point level, but our objectives within the game are different, right? Maybe it's like I'm trying to destroy a defender, then the defender has to last 5 rounds. Those are different objectives, even though we could be playing a very balanced game. And so that is a core idea there. Narrative is not the same thing as bad game design, right? And I think that's a hard thing to stress. It is generally the more competitive side that pushes things for sharper, cleaner rules, more efficient, cutting out the fat of games in terms of like the number of charts you have to roll on and stuff like that. But all those things that we hear people who are a very loud minority within the competitive space, they benefit us narrative guys who are just dumpy in the garage and just have fun, and are just there to tell stories specifically. And I'll give you an example of how some folks make the world better for us when they're competitively minded. In the ye old days, when AOS first dropped, if you were a dwarf player, there was a rule across a couple, I think, War Scrolls where if you had a bigger beard than your opponent, then you got a special effect. And it's something dumb like, you know, I think the equivalent now would be like, no, roll a die on a 6, you get that special effect kind of a thing, which is one of those tiny little things that's not really a big deal. But there were a whole bunch of those. There was, if you were Tomb King's player, and you had Cetra, if you got your opponent to kneel at some point, like, I don't know, tricking them into tying their shoe or something, you could do a staring contest, all these very, they're not even fluffy. They're just like sub-contest games that were baked into the War Scroll rules, and immediately the entire community was like, nope, I'm not growing my beard out so that I can play with my toy soldiers better. And so, hey, Kevin Eldon, I say the olden days because there's so many folks who came since that point. Press F for Tomb Kings. But, you know, there was just a whole bunch of super wacky things that, you know, I don't know how they got through quality assurance, little QA testing in terms of how people would receive those things. But they did, and that was the game. And so, you know, people were very, very upset about that, and they vocalized that, and they wanted streamlined rules that made more sense, that were clear, that were legit. And it just made the game better. And so I wanted to chat just a little bit about, you know, things that make the games better for us. I'm sorry, my page is being all kinds of crazy here. And so I wanted to talk about a few of the benefits. What are the things that complaining is the wrong word, but bringing attention to some of the negative aspects to the developer in a positive, constructive way. How has that helped the game grow? And frankly, how should it, you know? Basically, how do we as narrative gamers benefit from people who are super into the matched play kind of scene? And one of them is game speed. Now, if you remember the last edition of Fantasy Battles, or 2 editions ago of 40K, before they made the big change to being more AOS-ish, the Chaos Demons and Orcs books, respectively, were terrible. And I don't mean terrible in terms of like how they did on the table. I don't know anything about it. I only played Fantasy Battles for like 8 months. I played maybe like 5 games of 40K back in, would that be 7th edition? But what I mean was, if you're a demon player, every single turn you have to roll on this chart to be like, what's the warp doing? And most of the time it does nothing for you. It was just extra rules. There was rolls and charts on everything. In Orcs and Goblins, you had the animosity table, which the campaign animosity is named after, where if you have like Orcs and Goblins next to each other, they have to roll a die to see, maybe I just want to beat up this guy instead of my enemy. And so all of a sudden your army could kind of fall apart into disarray. There was just charts upon charts and things to roll on, and they just kind of kept bolting on rules, and it makes the game way, way longer. And so having a competitive mindset regarding this hobby has actually been a benefit to us as narrative folks, because we're busy adults. We got stuff to do. Some of us have kids, you know, all this kind of stuff. So having simplified rules that were streamlined so that you can crank out a game. What is the tournament length? Usually like 2.5 hours, something like that. And that had to happen because now tournament organizers can actually make schedules that make sense. Instead of everything having to be a 2-day, you know, I almost said hullabaloo, and I was like, I'm not a 90-year-old, whatever. So, you know what I mean? It's just like having this big event. Now you can create a reasonable schedule. You can keep things tight and with the time. And then frankly, just things just take less time. And that's something I can't emphasize enough, that the more games you can get in, the more engaged in your hobby you're going to be. Beyond that, I had rules become more manageable and easier to remember. Now, I've been a big proponent of AOS reminders. If you guys have not seen it, it is a website where awesome guy Davis Ford and his team came together and they basically took all the rules from your battle tome, as well as all the various supplements, and put them into almost like a calculator. So then you list off what army you are, what your allegiance is, and what units you're taking, and it gives you a phase-by-phase guide. So like in your hero phase, here are the 3 things you need to remember about XYZ models. And you can literally go phase by phase and never miss a beat. That was really tough to do with fantasy battles because there were so many things that were rules that weren't on a war scroll or entry or whatever you want to call it in their army book. And so, I mean, and stuff like your brick of dudes has to wheel, or can only wheel so far, and that kind of stuff where it's like, okay, this is just a fundamental game rule, but it's its own level of, I don't know, study to learn those things. Never mind the fact that your army also has a whole bunch of rules that modify those things. And so the game was so much more complex that it was very inaccessible. And so when they came out with AOS and the movement was just like, that guy moves 5 inches. Just go wherever the heck you want. Don't go on a building, right? You know what I mean? Where they just cut out so much fat that it made the game far more accessible. And that kind of stuff was an absolute win. And again, I mean, that's one that also kind of goes into speeding things up, but in a different way. I thought that was really, really cool. The way they kind of, simplifying things. There is a point where sometimes I miss things. Like sometimes I miss the wackiness of the chaos table in terms of, warp storms making strange things happen on the battlefield. But all in all, in terms of just walking up to a game night and just having a good experience with a pickup game with a friend, this is the best it's ever been. Like straight up. I mean, I know there's discussions to be had about bloat, but I just love it. I love it so much more than when I was playing fantasy battles or 40k for that matter, the old 40k. Awesome rules as defined by, things that are clean and quick and that competitive players really push for. They allow us to represent fictional events better. Now, my example for this is blood tithe points. Okay? If I say to you, okay, every single time, let's say you've never heard of Khorne. Okay, you're just a guy who loves competitive games, guy or gal, who loves competitive games, and you're sitting there, and I say to you, okay, here's your army's mechanic. Every time one of your dudes dies, you get a resource point, and you can, anyone dies, you get a resource point, and you can spend those resources in XYZ way. That's a mechanic. Like, they're rules. They're just rules. They're a mechanic. They've been tuned a bit since, Khorne's gotten a couple books now, and the rules have kind of, FAQs and that kind of stuff have worked around them. But, like, at the end of the day, it's just a set of rules. And if it's really well written, people receive it well and they love it. But also, because they took the time to articulate how those things interact, how units dying can be spent or redeemed to do other special effects, they take mechanics and make them a story. So now you, as a Khorne, player in AOS, even if you're a hardcore narrative gamer, that mechanic is in its own way telling a story. And so that's kind of the duality with all these rules, is that they have to be really well written and articulated so that we can play the game. It's a rule, but then at the same time, if a really well done rule is one that not only achieves that first goal, but then does it in a way that is super flavorful for the army, that it captures people who are playing a narrative game, but we still benefit from the simplicity of it, right? Like, if you're watching a Rerolling One's battle report, which I highly suggest you do, it's awesome. Every single time Jack's playing and something dies, you will hear him go, blood tithe point, right? Because it's just a fun thing. It's fun, it's narrative, and it's flavorful, but also it is a mechanic. And so those are the best things. That one's a little bit hard to represent, but when you think about some of the game mechanics, I like some of them a lot for what they add in terms of flavor. And I'm so glad that there's like crunchy rules to represent that. So for me, with my Nurgle, I love the fact that narratively what I'm doing is I'm bringing the Garden of Nurgle out. amongst the mortal realms, and I'm like throwing feculent gnarlmaws, and now we're summoning demons, and things are gross, and you know what I mean? I love that. But there have to be rules to articulate that, and that is things like summoning points, having, you know, where you have placed the corruption, meaning are there Nurgle models in your deployment zone, are there Nurgle models in your opponent's zone, that kind of thing. That is the basis of how you spread the Garden of Nurgle. Now that one's a little bit awkward. I don't quite love the rules crunchy aspect. It's a little bit wordy, but I think it's trying to achieve a very cool narrative thing. Let's see, and just kind of as a side note on that last one, I also think that battalions. This is wholly AOS, right? I mean, because 40K moved away from battalions kind of as we know them for the most part, but it allows you to just make narrative things. So for example, every book could have, okay, here's your bog standard mega battalion that you'll never take, but you always kind of want to, like if you were going to play like an 8,000 point game. And then they always have, okay, here's your leaders, right? Here's a battalion of just your best and brightest in your army. Okay, here's a battalion of your troop, you know, and they kind of just have like cookie cutter things. But then some of them, they take a step further and are like, no, in my army, I run an Affliction Cyst. An Affliction Cyst is not just a weird combination of models. It is 1/3 of what a Nurgle army is thematically. And so it is like this striking scorpion tail, because like they're all on the flyers, they can get there faster and they lash out and get you. Whereas the Blight Cyst and the Plague Cyst are the other two respectively, but all of those things I can build into my army. Like that's a very narrative thing. They didn't have to write the book in such a way that the cysts, man, that's a nasty sentence, the cysts were how the army is built, but they chose to, and now I, as a narrative player, get the benefits of like, oh man, what would that look like in my army? That sounds so cool. And so having rules that go along with them and how they put units together, battalions to me are the perfect grounds for narrative flavor with what models you pick and kind of how you represent a specific force, along with the crunchy rule side of like, okay, but how can we tell that story, right? One of the criticisms I've always had of the Stormcast book is I don't like any other battalions, because I don't feel like they're representing a specific action per se. Like it's not like a specific force that's going out to do a thing. It's always a lot of them just feel like, and we need to put this model in a battalion, so we'll just tack it here. Like they're playing like the pin the tail on the donkey. This is the whole wall of Stormcast units, and they have a battalion. But those are the big things where it's just like there's so many ways for rules to benefit us as narrative players, because they make things clear and concise. We use the same language, so there's a myriad of people who love playing narrative games, but also match play competitive ones. And I say like competitive in that side note of being like tournament stuff. So like, you know, me and Jack are both people. He competes definitely more than I do, but I still like going to one-day events just to meet people and hang out and get out of the house. So like both of those styles of play appeal to me, in different degrees, but you know, I like them both, but there's still something there for me with both of them as the rules get better and tighter and faster. We just benefit a lot. And so, the last little thing here, I wanted to talk about points, because points is a point of contention when it comes to a lot of gamers, and I know that I am guilty of when I see people really get super over passionate about how much a unit's cost in points has gone up or down. I look at that and I'm like, dude, nobody cares. Like it's fine, just roll with it. It's a Games Workshop game. It's gonna come down later. Like it's whatever, you know. I just have zero care. But the truth of the matter is, points are important, but kind of in a different way. So I think of myself as a narrative gamer. Like I said before, I play narrative missions with narrative armies, but we do use match play points. And the reason for that is points, much like rules, are a language. And with that language, you are able to communicate what kind of game you want to have with your opponent. And I think that's something we don't stop and think about enough, that like every aspect of you playing a game. It could be with a friend, with your significant other, with a complete stranger at an event, like Nova, you know what I mean? Like where there's like 500 other musky bunch boys just hanging around, you know, stinking up the place, and you're just in a sea of people that you don't know. At every single one of those stages, this is the most intensely collaborative thing that many of us do. By that I mean, when I'm at work, I don't actually have to work with people a whole lot, but if I'm going to play a game with a buddy, even a good buddy, okay, we need to work together to decide how we want the terrain laid out, what kind of mission do we want to play, what story are we trying to tell, you know, and that kind of stuff. And so it's a very collaborative thing. Well, one of the essential parts of any collaboration is just being able to communicate clearly, and points are not perfect. They're always going to be wrong in someone's opinion, but they allow us to have that discussion. So points do not mean equal points, and what I mean by that is I like asymmetrical games. I would be so happy to be like, okay, Doug, you're defending a Nurgle fortress. You need to last until turn 4. You get 1,500 points to build an army. I'm going to have 2,000 points and I need to kill you by turn 5. Like that. I mean, even in that, even though the points are not equal, they are asymmetrical, they allow us to tell a story. They allow us to communicate. Okay, Doug is the defender who doesn't have as many guys, and they're stalwart and they need to hang in there. Whereas my army is a complete, you know, quote unquote, complete full force that's invading them. And so you get this awesome thing where, you know, it's not about the specific points of the unit, but having points, period, and then having points that reflect what those units do to an extent. I mean, I think there's always a little wiggle room in terms of points and that kind of thing. They just allow us to have a discussion of like, I want to have a defender. Okay, well, if an army is, we'll put on our gamer lingo here and we'll say army is super broken, which means they have amazing units that are incredibly cheap. Even though we've had that discussion about, okay, Doug's going to be 500 points down and he's defending, he has to survive and outlast. If my units are costed too aggressively across the board, no matter how thematically an army I can make, we're not going to have the experience that we were intending to when we started this game. We need the points to be adjusted to reflect what we were trying to do. And so, of course, you know, if it's someone you're friends with, you can be like, huh, yeah, that is too good. And you'll just, you know, take a unit off the board because who cares? But if you know, something like a narrative event or something you're paying to get into, you want those things to be balanced. I mean, and balanced is even not the right word. I just mean like in the relative zone of doing what it should do at an appropriate amount of your army points being taken away. And so it's a very interesting place to be, because you see stuff like, for example, Slaanesh. When Slaanesh first dropped, it was too good. Like I always brag about Jack because he's like one of my favorite people, but he had a Slaanesh army. Was very excited for the book. It came out. It was so good that it wasn't fun, because even in our fun, fluffy narrative games, because the efficiency was tuned so flippin' high, he would just sweep us. And I mean, and like, that's not, it had nothing to do with him, you know, being a competitive nerd and just trying to like stomp his friends. Nothing. He had, you know, he's like, I have demonettes. It's like, demonettes are awesome. That's literally the baseline troop of their army, and they're incredible. Or at least all the things surrounding the heroes and that kind of stuff, it all was. And so having things get adjusted like that with FAQs and of course points go a long way to kind of helping us as narrative players who don't focus on those things per se, in terms of like, you know, list crafting and that kind of thing. It helps us still communicate with our opponents what kind of experience we want to have. And honestly, that was pretty much all I wanted to talk about today, was that there are just so many benefits. Don't be derisive when people start complaining about points or balance issues and that kind of thing. I would just really suggest asking like example asking them for examples as to why this is a non-fun experience. And so that's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, is this an actual problem? Is this a list building thing? Did we just not communicate what kind of experience we wanted to have throughout the day? You know, and kind of find those things out. But the truth is, we're all in this hobby together. We all benefit when things get better. When Games Workshop makes better rules, better adjusted points, you know, that kind of stuff, we all benefit, you know. And I just think back, to specifically a point where I was away visiting another store, and they were telling me, oh yeah, we're starting a Path to Glory campaign. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, that's so cool. And they said, yeah, we had this one person who was going to join, but they wanted to do Flesh Eater Courts, and everyone told them that's just not right for Path to Glory. Spezia, thank you so much. I'll get to your thing in just a second. I'm almost done with my little rant here. And they basically talked to this person out of playing Flesh Eater Courts for their first army. And I was like, that sucks. That sucks that someone saw models and was like, I want to play that. But because of the reputation for imbalance that it had, people steered them away from that. It's like, well, truth is, Flesh Eater Courts is fine. Gristlegore was the problem, but Flesh Eater Courts are just fine. And so those kinds of things are why discussions around balance and points and efficiency and FAQ, all of that matters, even if we're not trying to be hardcore gamey and win 4-0 at an event or that kind of stuff. So, yeah. That's all that I had. So anyway, I'm gonna answer Spezia's question, because on this show, if you chip in a little bit as a tip, you get to ask a question, and I will make it a priority topic here. And so Spezia asks, what god would you like to see get a model? I think, what god would I like to see get a model? I think Kurnoth's dead, but I'd kind of like to see that. I don't really know what happened to him, to be honest with you. What god? I'm just going through my little mental Rolodex of all of them. You know, I think it would be kind of funny to troll the Stormcast players and have a Sigmar model of him, but he's just sitting in his chair, and all you do is put him in the dead center of your deployment zone. He just sits there. He buffs the army, but he doesn't actually like do anything. He's just kind of there. For me, Malarian would probably be my non-trolly answer, because I love the idea of just like, Shadow is one of those things that the sculptors have, I think, in the last like 3 or 4 years really nailed. Like when I think of like Mistweaver Sai, or that new Daughters of Cain warband coming to Underworlds, like where their cloaks fade into shadows at the bottom. Like, I think that is next level stuff that I'm like, I want to see more of that, because then you get into really cool blending and color theory and that kind of stuff as far as how the shadows work and that kind of thing. So that's what I like to see. If I had to pick one god, Malarian, or Malekith as Joseph called him, but yeah, same guy. So absolutely. Let's see, I want a Sotek model. I think that might make Lore Master Sotek's channel a little too happy. Man. Let's see what we got here. Jacob. Yeah, no, I think that's all I had here. I'm just looking at the chat to make sure I didn't miss anybody. What about a Gork and Mork model? Well, it's interesting. I was reading a White Dwarf, and they were talking about kind of Gork and Mork respectively, and that they're just kind of this primal force, and they're described as being two orcs that come together or whatever, but I don't know if it's ever going to get a model. Like, it's kind of like saying, like, give Nurgle a model. Like, Nurgle's too big. He represents too much to have a singular model on the table, I would think. I mean, they might come out with it tomorrow. I don't know. I just imagine an actual Nurgle model relative to the size of the Greater Demons. He would be the 6x4. Like, you buy the Nurgle model and it just comes with a base that's this big, and the directions just say, okay, now you as the player need to sit on the pie plate and you are Nurgle. Forget gods, give us more god beasts. We only have one god beast model, and she's undead. What's the undead god beast? Undead god beast. Someone throw that out there. I can't think of what chaos Xander's referring to. I would love to do avatars. Yeah, someone had through in the chat. Would you rather do an avatar of Gorkamorka? Then I would really like that, because I mean, functionally, that's what Nagash is. When you play Nagash on the table, it's not necessarily saying this is truly Nagash. It's saying this is a representation of him that he cobbled together from a bunch of dead stuff. If you read the book Undying King, which I'm going to give a spoiler for, so tune out if you want to read it and you haven't heard it yet. So I'll give you that. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. At the end of the book, Nagash brings forth a new body for himself, and it's like a whole bunch of zombies just like mashed together, and he doesn't look like the Nagash model. It's not described as the one that we would know, but it is Nagash, and he took a form, and that's the kind of stuff that I want to see. Okay, spoiler over, we're good. So that's kind of the thing that I would see as far as like, I want more like avatars or representations or embodiments, that kind of thing. I actually really like the idea of the Cain statues from Daughters of Cain. I don't think it's executed well. I really think that they were just like, oh man, we built an entire army around this one kit of, you know, the altar or whatever it is. What do we do with the Rio de Janeiro Jesus version of Cain? And they were like, oh, I can give him rules. But in those rules, I like what they did as far as like, you pray to the deity takes form here on the table, and it just like, I wax you with the sword. I mean, he just, you know, I like that quite a bit, actually. And so I think expanding on those kinds of things as far as like bringing gods to the table in different ways than just having a straight model. So that would kind of be my thought. Anyway, Caleb says, say that it gives a buff for Mork on a 1 to 3 and Gork on a 4 to 6. Absolutely. That's the kind of stuff that I'm into, where it's random, but it's like controlled randomness. And what I mean by that is like if I want to have a representation of a deity come to a battle, I want it to be impactful and meaningful because it's, you know, the eyes and attention of a god focusing on one specific thing. But at the same time, I don't want an army built around that, because I still want an army. Let's go with your orc example, right? I want an avatar of Gorka Mork to be a really expensive piece, a big model that is in no way necessary to the way the faction functions. Like, kind of like how Alariel's with Sylvaneth. You can play 1,000 different Sylvaneth armies without Alariel and never touch her. Same thing. Nagash is a little bit harder because Legions of Nagash is pretty good with him. But in terms of those kinds of things, like, because what I don't want is a situation where new players have to have all that complexity of, like, you know, even that just that simple roll of 1 to 3 is a buff from Mork and Gork and that kind of stuff. Well, those things are just layers of rules, and so having it be completely detached from the army specifically, and it's just an add-on thing that you can get, makes it nice, because that way you can like slow roll the process of getting more and more comfortable with an army. You don't have to just cannonball in and get engulfed by all the different rules. So yeah. Let's see here. I thought I saw a question for me. Oh, Spezia, here we go. Question. Since you recommended it, I went and listened to the Is Archaon a God episode. Is he? Why? How is he not? So, yeah, we'll talk about this, and this is going to be my final topic to close out the show, because I got to do some recording, so I got to save my voice. But my understanding, they've been very vague on Archaon's objectives and that kind of thing, and I'm really hoping that this next chapter in the AOS main story arc, like the overarching story arc with Marathi, that book that's coming out, really addresses it. Is that What is godhood, and how is it achieved? I think those are the two questions that we need to ask, because to answer your questions, Betsy, I don't really know. To me, functionally, he has not achieved godhood because he can't take a piece of himself and create a demon. And that's not necessarily like the benchmark, but it's how I compare him to the other Chaos Gods. He can't do that. He does have all these armies under his control. He's very intelligent. He's able to play the game, like the great game, along with them, in terms of, not giving into any of them, doing his own thing. I love it. But I don't know where that line is, so I don't know. So you want Gork and Mork Avatar to be a Forge World model? No, I don't really like Forge World models. I more want it to be kind of like... You know what I want it to be like? I want the inclusion of a deity model, right? Or at least their presence or their rules to function kind of like the Big Wa does from the Orcs book, where you have Iron Jaws, you have Bone Splitters. And there's this thing that's totally different where you can just take whatever you want, but they're unified by something. Whereas in this case, it would be the presence of Gorka Morka unifies whatever destruction armies are out there. Okay, they don't care. They're all super happy to see Gorka Morka. And that has its own allegiance abilities based on, is it Gork in charge or is it Mork in charge? And the model can kind of represent those things. But I was more thinking allegiance abilities, to be honest with you. Now I want Gorka Morka demons. Nice. Okay. So Archaon is Catacross. I don't know what that means. Because Catacross doesn't want godhood. He wants to just murder. Which is, whatever. Short-sighted, I would say. But whatever. So anyway, friends, I'm going to go ahead and hop off here. Do all destruction armies believe in Gorka Morka? I don't know if it's flat said yes or no, but all the ones we've seen so far have at least incorporated him into their mythos. So they have wildly different ideas about what Gorka Morka is, or who he is, or what he does, but that name is tied in there. So it's not quite like Nurgle has very specific things that empower him. So you have, obviously rot, decay, and disease, but also hopelessness and being forlorn and that kind of stuff. Whereas Gorka Morka, his factions worship him and revere him in wildly different ways. And so, like, the Iron Jaws couldn't care less about the Bad Moon. So, you know what I mean? I don't know. Anyway, friends, I am going to hop off here. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, I apologize for the delay in my weekly show, but we'll be back here. I got some cool questions from patrons I want to hop into. Just asking stuff. What do I got here on the docket? Interesting relationships between factions and gods, how chaos corruption works in the realms, and then a few questions about like list building and things like that I can probably chime in a little bit on. So thank you all so much for joining me, and I look forward to catching you all in my next live stream. Happy wargaming.